The when and how of L1 transfer in second language learning. Now, if we are saying that the first language is a structure, as a knowledge structure in the mind, which can't possibly be erased, then it has to have some sort of influence, as we said. And then the question is what sort of influence that is. So while most of the influence they started to say was positive, yet there were arguments in there, and it went on in this research that we find in these years. So it was argued that if there are certain similarities, it's not always that the similarities will lead to a positive transfer. Sometimes the similarities can actually lead to errors or negative transfer, because they are what they call something like false friends. So things will appear to be same, but they will be different. For instance, I always give this example of wow. Now the wow in Urdu is different from the W sound in English, like what. But when the students say what, so they are trying to this sound because it seems to be similar. It is transferred to the learning of the second language. It happens at lexical level also, and I would say lexical means word level also, and I would say it also happens at phonological level. It is also argued that at times the first language can lead to errors which over the time become fossilized. We know what fossilization is. Fossilization are errors that seem to get stuck, that the learners never overcome them, that remain there, always there in the language of the second language learner. We all know that although we learn the second language, our language never becomes the same as the native speaker. Some people are able to make that transition, and especially those who move abroad. Otherwise, certain systems that we have learned in our, especially phonological systems or sound systems that we have learned in our first language, remain fossilized. And even when we learn the second language, we do not pronounce or we don't use the same accent as that of the native speakers. This accounts for the difference in the accents of, for instance, Indians and Pakistani, the way they speak the language, and the British, how they speak the language, or the Americans, the way they speak the language. You can see the fossilization of certain word sounds. And because they say it is the fossilization is occurring because of the first language sound system, it retards or inhibits the learning of the second language. It is said in certain researches that borrowing from L1 will be helpful if the similarity is between the first language and the second language exists. So some say it will cause error, some say it will resolve error. In any case, the contrast, the difference or the similarity between the two languages will be a variable that will affect second language learning path. It is also argued that if we want to sort of understand the kind of problems the learners will face, we need to pay attention to marked forms like ED, where there's some forms where the words change their form a little bit to explain a change in the grammar or grammatical structure. So they say that the learner, whenever the word form is marked, the learners will make more errors. It is also said, interestingly, that the learning path for the learner, although it will be complex, will also depend on the interaction of the perception of the learner of how close does he feel in terms of his own language and the second language he or she is learning. So the distance between the first language and the second language, the perceived difference by the learner himself or herself, will also lead to his or her perception of how difficult or easy it is to learn the second language, and that will affect his or her progress in the second language. However, it is argued that this distance is in constant flux. So it's not a given, because the more the child or the learner learns the language, the more the distance in the perception of the learner will also shorten, and the learning will become easier. However, it is an important factor. In any case, the main argument, and what do we learn from all this, is that yes, L1 transfer will occur. We cannot stop it. It will be positive in certain instances, it will be negative in certain instances, but it can, although it can affect the route, affect the time taken to learn the second language, it can't affect the route, the way a second language is learned. And similarly, thinking about Dewey and Bird, yes, the learners who learn their second language develop an interlanguage system, a creative construction of language, but there is still first language still finds a room or some place in that.